In-laws forged my signature and stole $200,000 from my inheritance after my husband's death, so I made them regret. I, F35, am still reeling from the shock and betrayal. My husband, David, M38, died 6 months ago in a sudden car accident. It was devastating, unexpected, and it completely shattered my world. We'd been married for 10 years, and he was my best friend, my partner, my everything. David was a successful software engineer, and he'd always been responsible with money. I'm a teacher, and while I love my job, I don't make nearly as much as he did. David had a will, drawn up several years ago, leaving everything to me. He'd also designated me as the beneficiary of his life insurance policy and his retirement accounts. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of even if something happened to him. The problem is David's family. His parents, Robert, M68, and Susan, F65, and his 2 siblings, Emily, F32, and John, M40, have always been difficult. They're the type of people who always seem to be in financial trouble, constantly asking for loans, making bad investments, and living beyond their means. David had helped them out financially many times over the years, much to my quiet frustration. I understood he loved his family, but I felt like they were taking advantage of his generosity. He'd always assure me that it was his money, and he could do what he wanted with it, but I still worried. After David's death, his family was surprisingly supportive, at least initially. They offered to help with the funeral arrangements. They brought over food, they checked in on me regularly. I was grateful for their support, even though I'd always felt a bit like an outsider in their family. Then came the reading of the will. When the lawyer announced that David had left everything to me, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Robert and Susan's faces went pale. Emily gasped. John just stared at the floor. The lawyer explained that the estate was substantial, including a sizable life insurance payout, David's $401,000, and the equity in our house. The total value was close to $800,000. After the reading, David's family started acting differently. They became more insistent, more demanding. They started hinting that David would have wanted them to be taken care of too. Susan started calling me almost daily, asking about the life insurance money. She'd say things like, "David always said he wanted to help his parents retire comfortably," or "Emily's struggling to pay her bills." And David would have wanted to help his little sister. Robert started talking about how he and Susan had sacrificed so much to raise David, and that they deserved a share of his success. John, who had a history of failed business ventures, started hinting that he had a great investment opportunity that David would have loved to be a part of. I tried to be polite, to be understanding. I told them that I needed time to grieve, to sort through everything. I said that I would consider their requests, but that I needed to follow David's wishes and secure my own future first. They didn't like that answer. They started pressuring me, guilting me, even accusing me of being selfish. I felt trapped. I was grieving the loss of my husband, and I was also dealing with the constant pressure from his family. I made a mistake. I caved. I agreed to help them out with some of the expenses. I wrote Susan a check for $10,000 to help with their mortgage. I gave Emily $5,000 to pay off some credit card debt. I even gave John $2,000 to invest in his latest scheme, which I knew was probably a scam. I thought it would appease them, at least for a while. I thought it would buy me some peace. I was wrong. It only made things worse. They saw it as a sign of weakness, a sign that I was willing to give in to their demands. The requests became more frequent, more outrageous. They started asking for larger sums of money, for cars, for vacations, for home renovations. I finally put my foot down. I told them I wasn't going to give them any more money. I said that David had left the inheritance to me and that I needed to respect his wishes. That's when they turned on me completely. They started spreading rumors about, telling people that I was hoarding David's money, that I was refusing to help his grieving family. They even accused me of manipulating David into leaving everything to me. Then, a few weeks ago, I discovered the truth, the horrifying. I was going through some old bank statements, trying to get my finances. I noticed a series of large withdrawals from a joint account that David and I, an account I rarely used. The withdrawals totaled over $200,000. I was confused. I hadn't made those withdrawals. I hadn't authorized. I contacted the bank and they launched an investigation. It turned out that David's parents had somehow gained access to the account. They'd forged my signature on withdrawal slips, claiming they had my permission to access the funds. They'd stolen $200,000 from me, from David's estate. I was furious. I was heartbroken. I was disgusted. I confronted them, of course. They initially denied it, then tried to justify it, saying that David would have wanted them to have the money. They said I was being ungrateful and selfish. I cut them off completely. I told them I never wanted to see them or speak to them again. I've contacted a lawyer and we're pursuing legal action. I'm also considering pressing criminal charges for forgery and theft. But the damage is done, the money is gone, and my relationship with David's family is irrevocably broken. I feel like I've lost everything. My husband, my financial security, and even the illusion of having a supportive family. AEDA for cutting them off, for pursuing legal action. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, but I also feel guilty, like I'm betraying David's memory by fighting with his family. Update 1. It's been a month since my original post, and the situation has escalated dramatically. After I confronted David's family about the stolen money, they went on the offensive. They started a smear campaign against me, spreading lies and rumors throughout our community and to anyone who would listen. They told people that I was a gold digger, that I'd manipulated David into leaving everything to me, that I was refusing to share the inheritance with his deserving family. They even claimed that I was having an affair before David died, and that's why he'd left them out of the will. This is completely false, of course. I loved David deeply, and I would never have betrayed him like that. Their lies have been incredibly hurtful and damaging. Some people have believed them, especially those who already had a negative opinion of me. I've lost friends. I've been ostracized by some members of our community, and I've even received threatening messages online. It's been incredibly isolating and stressful. I've had to take a leave of absence from my teaching job because I couldn't handle the constant whispers and stares. But I'm not backing down. I'm fighting back. I've hired a lawyer, Ms. Chen, who specializes in estate litigation and defamation cases. She's been amazing, supportive, aggressive, and incredibly knowledgeable. We've filed a lawsuit against Robert, Susan, Emily, and John, seeking to recover the stolen $200,000, plus damages for defamation and emotional distress. We've also sent cease and desist letters to several people who have been spreading the lies, demanding that they retract their statements and apologize. The legal process is slow and expensive, but I'm determined to see it through. I need to clear my name, and I need to hold David's family accountable for their actions. Ms. Chen has also uncovered some disturbing information about David's family's financial history. It turns out they have a long history of debt, bad investments, and even legal trouble. Robert and Susan have declared bankruptcy twice in the past. John has been sued multiple times for unpaid debts. And Emily has a history of racking up huge credit card bills and then defaulting on the payments. They're not just irresponsible with money, they're actively deceitful and manipulative. They've been living off of other people's generosity for years, and they saw David's death as another opportunity to enrich themselves. It's sickening. It makes me realize how much David shielded me from their true nature. He always made excuses for them, always tried to protect me from their drama. I've also discovered that the joint account they used to steal the money wasn't actually a joint account at all. It was an account that David had opened years ago before we were even married. He'd added my name to it as a secondary account holder in case of emergency, but I'd never used it, and I'd honestly forgotten it even existed. David's family somehow found out about the account. I suspect they snooped through his old bank papers, and they used that information to forge my signature and withdraw the funds. The bank is also investigating the matter, and they've admitted that they made a mistake by not verifying the withdrawals more thoroughly. They're cooperating with the police investigation, and they've promised to reimburse me for the stolen funds if we can't recover them from David's family. As for my emotional state, I'm a mess. I'm still grieving David's death, and I'm also dealing with the added trauma of his family's betrayal. I'm in therapy, and it's helping, but it's a slow process. I have good days and bad days. Some days I feel strong and determined. Other days I just want to curl up in a ball and cry. I've also started attending a support group for widows and widowers. It's been helpful to connect with other people who understand what I'm going through. I'm trying to focus on the positive things in my life. My friends who have stood by me, my supportive colleagues, my love for teaching. But it's hard. The pain is still raw. The wounds are still fresh. I'll update again when there are further developments. Thank you, as always, for your support. It means the world to me. Update 2. I had a family meeting with David's side, and I use the term family very loosely at this point, that I have to share. This whole situation has gone from awful to bizarre. After the initial legal threats and under pressure from their lawyer, who I suspect told them they didn't have a leg to stand on, Robert and Susan contacted me. They wanted to talk things out and find a solution. I was extremely hesitant, but Ms. Chen advised me to attend, with her present, of course. She said it could be an opportunity to negotiate a settlement, and it would also give us a chance to gauge their state of mind. The meeting took place at Ms. Chen's office. Present were Robert, Susan, Emily, John, their lawyer, Ms. Chen, and me. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. Robert started by trying to play the grieving father card. He talked about how much they missed David, how they were still struggling to cope with his loss, and how this whole legal battle was just adding to their pain. Susan chimed in, saying that they had only ever wanted what was best for David, and that they were sure he would have wanted them to be taken care of. Emily and John mostly stayed silent, looking sullen and resentful. Ms. Chen, bless her heart, cut right through their BS. She laid out the facts, clearly and concisely. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the defamation campaign. She said that we had overwhelming evidence and that we were prepared to take this case all the way to trial. Their lawyer, looking increasingly uncomfortable, tried to argue that the withdrawals were a misunderstanding, that Robert and Susan had believed they had my permission to access the account. Ms. Chen laughed, a cold, hard laugh. A misunderstanding? They forged her signature on multiple withdrawal slips, totaling over $200,000. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. The conversation, if you can call it that, went downhill from there. Robert and Susan started yelling, accusing me of being greedy and heartless. Emily started crying, claiming that I was ruining her life. John just sat there, looking like he wanted to disappear. Then Susan dropped a bombshell. "David promised us that money," she shrieked. "He said he'd take care of us. He said he'd help us buy a new house." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "What are you talking about?" "Before he died," she continued, her voice rising, "he told us he was planning to leave you. He said he was unhappy, that you were controlling and manipulative. He said he was going to change his will, leave everything to us." The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's a lie," I said, my voice trembling. "David would never have said that." "He did," Susan insisted. "He told us he was going to leave you, and he was going to make sure we were taken care of." Emily and John surprisingly nodded in agreement. "He told us too," Emily said, wiping away her tears. "He said he was miserable." I looked at Ms. Chen, my eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She gave me a reassuring look, then turned to their lawyer. "Do you have any evidence to support these claims?" she asked. Their lawyer stammered, "Well, no, not written evidence." But nothing," Ms. Chen interrupted. "Unless you have concrete proof, these are just baseless accusations, designed to deflect blame and manipulate the situation." The meeting ended shortly after that. We made no progress. Their lawyer said he would consult with his clients and get back to us. I left the meeting feeling shaken. I didn't believe Susan's claims. I couldn't believe them. David loved me. We had a good marriage. We had plans. But a tiny seed of doubt had been planted. What if there was some truth to it? What if David had been unhappy? What if he had been planning to leave me? I spent the next few days in a state of turmoil. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. I kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with David, searching for clues, for any hint that he'd been unhappy. Then I remembered something. A few weeks before he died, David had mentioned that he needed to update his will. He'd said it was just a routine update, to reflect some changes in our financial situation. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now I wondered. I contacted the lawyer who had drawn up David's original will. I explained the situation, and I asked if David had contacted him about making any changes. The lawyer confirmed that David had contacted him a few weeks before his death. He'd requested a meeting to discuss significant revisions to his will, but the meeting had never taken place, because David had died before it could be scheduled. The lawyer couldn't tell me what those significant revisions were due to attorney-client privilege, but the fact that David had even considered changing his will, it was devastating. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know who to trust. I'm starting to question everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about David, about my own life. I'll update again when I have more information. I'm going to try to find out what David was planning to do with his will. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Update 3. I found it. A letter from David. A letter he wrote to me, but never gave me. After my last update, I was consumed with the need to know what David had been planning to do with his will. The lawyer couldn't tell me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. I started going through David's old files, his personal belongings. I know it sounds morbid, but I needed to feel close to him, to try to understand what was going on in his head before he died. I spent hours searching, sifting through boxes of old tax returns, bank statements, insurance policies. I found nothing. Then I remembered a small wooden box that David kept in his desk drawer. It was a keepsake box filled with mementos from our life together. Ticket stubs from our first date, dried flowers from our wedding, photos of us on vacation. I'd avoided opening the box since he died. It felt too painful, but I knew I had to look. I carefully opened the box, my hands trembling. I sifted through the contents, each item triggering a flood of memories. And then I saw it. A sealed envelope tucked away at the bottom of the box. My name was written on the front, in David's handwriting. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew instinctively that this was it. This was the answer I'd been searching for. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages long, dated just 2 weeks before David's death. The letter was heartbreaking, and it confirmed my worst fears, but also, strangely, gave me a sense of closure. David wrote that he had been unhappy in our marriage for a long time. He said that he felt like we'd grown apart, that we'd become different people. He said that he felt trapped, suffocated. He wrote that he'd been considering leaving me, but he didn't know how. He was afraid of hurting me, of hurting the children. We didn't have children. This was a hypothetical he was thinking through, apparently. He wrote that he'd met someone else, a woman at his work. He said that he'd fallen in love with her, that she made him feel alive again. He wrote that he was planning to change his will, to leave a portion of his assets to his family to ensure that they were taken care of. He said he knew it would hurt me, but that he felt it was the right thing to do. But then, the letter took a turn. He wrote that he'd realized he was making a mistake, that he couldn't go through with it, that he couldn't leave me, that he couldn't betray our marriage. He wrote that he'd broken things off with the other woman, that he'd decided to recommit to our marriage, to try to make things work. He wrote that he loved me, that he was sorry for hurting me, and that he hoped I could forgive him. He ended the letter by saying that he was going to destroy the revised will, that he was going to tell me everything, and that he was going to spend the rest of his life making it up to me. He never got the chance. I sat there reading the letter over and over again, tears streaming down my face. It was a mixture of grief, relief, anger, and understanding. David had been unhappy. He had considered leaving me, but he'd chosen to stay. He'd chosen to fight for our marriage and his family. They'd lied. They'd used his unhappiness, his momentary infidelity to justify their greed, their theft. I contacted Ms. Chen and told her about the letter. She said it was a significant piece of evidence and that it would strengthen our case. She also said that it changed the narrative. It wasn't just about the stolen money anymore. It was about clearing David's name, about exposing his family's lies, about protecting his legacy. I'm still processing everything. I'm still grieving. But I also feel a sense of peace. I know the truth now. And I know that David, despite his flaws, loved me. I'm going to continue to fight. For David, for myself, and for the truth. The next update will be about the legal proceedings, I guess. Update 4. The legal battle is finally over, and we won. After discovering David's letter, the case took a dramatic turn. Ms. Chen presented the letter as evidence, arguing that it not only proved David's intent to leave his assets to me, but it also exposed his family's lies and manipulation. Their lawyer tried to argue that the letter was inadmissible, that it was hearsay, that it couldn't be authenticated, but Ms. Chen countered that it was a dying declaration, a statement made by someone who believed they were about to die, and therefore admissible as evidence. The judge agreed. The letter, combined with the overwhelming evidence of forgery and theft, was devastating to their case. Robert, Susan, Emily, and John were facing serious criminal charges, including forgery, theft, and conspiracy. They were also facing a civil lawsuit for the stolen money and for defamation. Their lawyer, realizing they had no chance of winning at trial, advised them to settle, and so they did. The settlement agreement is as follows. 1. Full restitution. They will repay the entire $200,000 they stole, plus interest. 2. Damages. They will pay an additional $100,000 in damages for defamation and emotional distress. 3rd, public apology. They will issue a public apology, retracting all their false statements about me and admitting their wrongdoing. 4. No contact. They will have no contact with me, directly or indirectly, for the rest of their lives. 5. Criminal charges dropped. In exchange for the above, I agreed to drop the criminal charges against them. Ms. Chen advised me that this was the best course of action, as it would avoid a lengthy and emotionally draining trial, and it would ensure that I received full financial compensation. It's not perfect. No amount of money can bring David back or erase the pain and suffering his family caused me, but it's something. It's justice. The settlement money will be placed in a trust fund for my future. I'm planning to use some of it to establish a scholarship in David's name for students pursuing careers in software engineering. It's a way to honor his memory and to give back to the community. As for David's family, I don't know what will happen to them. They've lost everything, their reputation, their financial security, and their connection to me. I don't feel any joy in their downfall. I just feel sadness. Sadness for the wasted lives, for the broken relationships, for the greed and deceit that destroyed everything. I'm trying to move on. I'm focusing on my career, on my friends, on my own healing. I'm still seeing Ethan, my boyfriend, and our relationship is growing stronger. He's been an incredible source of support and understanding. I'm also working on forgiving myself for not seeing the signs, for not knowing about David's unhappiness, for not being able to prevent this tragedy. It's a long process, but I'm getting there, one step at a time. This will truly be my final update. I need to close this chapter of my life and move forward. Thank you again to everyone who has followed my story, who has offered words of encouragement, who has shared their own experiences. You've helped me more than you know. I've learned a lot from this ordeal. I've learned about the importance of trust, the fragility of relationships, and the resilience of the human spirit. I've also learned that sometimes the people you think you know best can surprise you in the worst possible ways. But most importantly, I've learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. Hope for healing, hope for justice, hope for a better future. And that's what I'm holding on to. Update 5. It's been a few months since the settlement. I thought I'd be feeling relief, closure, but honestly, it's been more complicated than that. As part of the agreement, Robert, Susan, Emily, and John were required to issue a public apology. Ms. Chen drafted the statement, and they had to publish it in the local newspaper and on their social media accounts, those that hadn't already been deactivated. It was a carefully worded apology, acknowledging their wrongdoing, retracting their false accusations against me, and expressing regret for their actions. They also had to explicitly state that David had not been planning to leave me, and that his will, leaving everything to me, was valid and reflected his true wishes. Seeing the apology in print, it was surreal. It felt like a victory of sorts, but it also felt hollow. It couldn't undo the damage they'd done, the pain they'd caused, and, predictably, the apology didn't change public opinion overnight. Some people were supportive, expressing relief that the truth had finally come out. Others remained skeptical, whispering that I'd somehow forced them to apologize, that I was still the greedy widow who'd stolen from David's family. I've learned to ignore the whispers, to focus on the people who matter. My friends, my colleagues, my therapist, Ethan, my boyfriend. They've been my rocks. The financial settlement has also been complicated. While they agreed to repay the $200,000, plus the additional $100,000 in damages, it hasn't been a straightforward process. They don't have the money readily available, of course. They're having to sell assets, their house, their cars, John's failed business ventures, which turned out to be even shadier. It's a slow, messy process, overseen by a court-appointed receiver. I've received some of the money, but it's likely to take months, even years, to recover the full amount. Honestly, the money is secondary. It's the principle of the thing. It's about holding them accountable for their action. But there's been something nagging at me, something that I can't quite shake. It's David's letter. I've reread it countless times, and while it confirms that he ultimately chose to stay with me, it also reveals a level of unhappiness, of dissatisfaction that I'd never fully acknowledged. He wrote about feeling trapped, suffocated. He wrote about meeting another woman, about feeling alive again. Those words, they sting. They make me question everything. Was I oblivious? Was I so focused on my own needs, my own career, that I didn't see the signs? Did I contribute to his unhappiness, even if unintentionally? I've been discussing this with my therapist, Dr. Lee. She's helped me understand that it's not about blaming myself, that David's choices were his own, and that I'm not responsible for his unhappiness. But it's hard to shake the feeling that I could have done something differently, that I could have been a better wife, a better partner. And then there's the other woman, the woman David mentioned in his letter. I don't know her name. I don't know anything about her, but she's a ghost in my marriage, a reminder of what could have been. I've considered trying to find her, to talk to her, but I don't know if that's a good idea. It might just open up old wounds, create more pain. I'm trying to move forward, to focus on the present, on the future, but the past, it keeps pulling me back. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. I'm still navigating this mess. It's a journey. Not a destination, I guess. Update 6. I did it. I found her. The woman David mentioned in his letter. I know I said I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but I couldn't help myself. The curiosity, the need to understand, it was too strong. It wasn't easy. David hadn't mentioned her name in the letter, only that she worked at his company. So I started there. I went through David's old work email, his contacts, his social media account, most of which he deactivated before he died. But I managed to recover some of them. It was like being a detective, piecing together fragments of his life that I'd never known existed. It took weeks, but finally I found her. Olivia Miller. She was a project manager at David's company, a few years younger than him. She was attractive, successful, seemingly normal. I found her LinkedIn profile, her Facebook page, which was mostly private, her Instagram account, which was public but mostly filled with pictures of landscapes and food. I didn't contact her directly. I didn't want to confront her, to accuse her. I just wanted to see her, to understand what David saw in her. I did some more digging. I found out where she worked, what coffee shop she frequented, what gym she went to. It sounds stalkerish, I know, and maybe it was, but I felt like I needed to do this, to get some kind of closure. Then, one day, I saw her. I was sitting in a cafe near her office, pretending to read a book when she walked in. She was even more attractive in person. She had a warm smile, a confident demeanor. She was talking to a coworker, laughing, seemingly carefree. I watched her for a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, jealousy, sadness, and curiosity. I wanted to approach her, to talk to her, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was afraid of what she might say, of what I might learn. So I just watched her, and then I left. I went home and cried. I cried for David, for myself, for the life we could have had. I realized that seeing her, confronting her, wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring David back. It wouldn't erase the pain, but it did do something. It humanized her. She wasn't just a ghost anymore, a nameless, faceless threat. She was a real person, with her own life, her own struggles, and I realized that I didn't hate her. I didn't blame her. David made his choices. He was responsible for his actions. I decided to let it go, to stop searching for answers, to stop dwelling on the past. I deleted her contact information. I unfollowed her on social media. I erased her from my mind as best I could. It was time to move on, truly move on. But of course, life had other plans. A few days later, I received a message on Facebook from Olivia Miller. I know who you are, the message said. I know about David. We need to talk. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do. Update 7. I met with Olivia. After receiving her message, I was terrified. I didn't know what she wanted, what she was going to say. I almost didn't respond. I almost blocked her, but I couldn't. I needed to know. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop near my apartment. I brought Ethan, my boyfriend, with me for support. Olivia was already there when I arrived. She was sitting at a table in the corner looking nervous. We exchanged awkward greetings. I introduced Ethan, and Olivia nodded politely. The first few minutes were tense. We made small talk about the weather, about the coffee, but the elephant in the room was looming over us. Finally, Olivia took a deep breath and said, "I'm so sorry." I stared at her, surprised. "Sorry? For what?" "For everything," she said, her voice trembling. for the affair, for the pain I caused you, for everything." She then proceeded to tell me her side of the story. She said that she and David had met at a work conference. They'd connected instantly, bonded over their shared interests, their similar sense of humor. She said that David had told her he was unhappy in his marriage, that he felt trapped, that he was planning to leave me. She said that she'd fallen in love with him, that she'd believed he was going to leave me, that they were going to start a new life together. She said that she'd known it was wrong, that she'd felt guilty, but that she'd been blinded by love. She said that David had broken things off with her suddenly, without explanation. He'd stopped returning her calls and texts. He'd avoided her at work. She said she'd been devastated, heartbroken. She'd had no idea why he'd changed his mind. Then, she'd heard about his death. She'd been shocked, grief-stricken. She said she'd wanted to reach out to me to express her condolences, but she'd been afraid. She'd known that I would hate her, that I would blame her. She said she'd been living with the guilt, the shame, for months. She said that she'd found out about the legal battle with David's family, about the stolen inheritance, about the lies they'd spread. She'd seen the public apology. She said that she'd realized she couldn't stay silent any longer. She needed to tell me the truth, to apologize, to try to make amends. I listened to her intently, searching her face for any sign of deception, but she seemed genuine. She seemed truly remorseful. I told her about David's letter, about how he'd ultimately chosen to stay with me, to fight for our marriage. She started to cry softly. "I didn't know," she said. "He never told me." We talked for over an hour. We talked about David, about our lives, about our regrets. It was cathartic. It was painful, but it was also healing. I realized that Olivia wasn't the monster I'd imagined her to be. She was a flawed human being who'd made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but she wasn't evil. I told her that I didn't forgive her, not yet, but that I understood. I told her that I appreciated her honesty, her courage in coming forward. We ended the conversation with a tentative truce. We agreed to stay in touch, to maybe, someday, even be friends. I left the coffee shop feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I still have a lot to process. I still have a lot of healing to do. But I'm starting to see a path forward, a path towards forgiveness, towards acceptance, towards peace. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I'm stronger now, wiser, more resilient, and I know that David, wherever he is, would be proud of me. Update 8. This is it, my final update, and it's a big one. After my meeting with Olivia, I thought I had finally reached a point of acceptance. I was still grieving David, still processing the betrayal, but I was starting to move on. Then I received a phone call from a lawyer, not Ms. Chen, my lawyer, but a different lawyer, a lawyer representing Robert and Susan. I was confused. I thought we were done with them. The settlement was finalized. The no contact order was in place. The lawyer explained that Robert and Susan had contacted him, claiming they had new information about David's will, about his assets. They were claiming that David had made changes to his will before he died, that he had intended to leave a portion of his estate to them. They were claiming that the letter I'd found, the letter where David said he was staying with me, was a fake, that I'd forged it to discredit them, to steal their inheritance. I was outraged. I couldn't believe their audacity. After everything they'd done, after the stolen money, the lies, the smear campaign, they were still trying to manipulate the situation, to get their hands on David's money. I immediately contacted Ms. Chen. She was furious. She said that this was a blatant attempt to overturn the settlement, and that we would fight it with everything we had. We prepared for another legal battle. We gathered evidence, we prepared witnesses, and we were ready to go to court. But then, something unexpected happened. Robert and Susan's lawyer contacted Ms. Chen again. He said that his clients had reconsidered their position. They were dropping their claim. We were stunned. What has changed? The lawyer wouldn't say. He just said that his clients had decided to move on and accept the original settlement. It was anticlimactic, but also a huge relief. We still didn't know why they'd backed down. What had made them change their minds? Then, a few days later, I received a package. In the mail, it was from Olivia. Inside the package was a small USB drive and a note. "I found this in David's old work files," the note said. "I think you need to see it." I plugged the USB drive into my computer, my hands shaking. It contained a video of David. He was sitting at his desk in his home office. He looked tired, sad. He started talking, addressing the camera. He said that he was making this video as a backup in case something happened to him. He said that he'd been having doubts about his marriage, that he'd been considering making changes to his will. He said that he'd met someone else, that he'd been tempted to leave me. But then he said he'd realized he was making a mistake. He said that he loved me, that he wanted to make our marriage work. He said that he was going to destroy the revised will, that he was going to tell me everything, that he was going to spend the rest of his life making it up to me. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said that he'd told his parents about his affair. He'd told them about his doubts, about his unhappiness. He'd told them that he was considering changing his will. He said that they'd encouraged him. They'd told him that he deserved to be happy, that he shouldn't stay in a marriage that was making him miserable. They'd told him that they would support him, no matter what he decided. But then he said he'd changed his mind. He'd told his parents that he was staying with me, that he was going to work on our marriage. And their reaction, it was different. They were angry. They were disappointed. They accused him of being weak, of being a fool. They told him that he was making a mistake, that he was throwing away his chance at happiness. They told him that if he stayed with me, he would regret it for the rest of his life. David ended the video by saying that he was worried about his family. He was worried about their reaction. He was worried about what they might do. He said that he was making this video as proof of his final wishes in case something happened to him. He said that he wanted me to have everything, that he loved me, that he was sorry. I sat there staring at the screen in complete shock. David's family hadn't just lied about his intentions. They'd actively encouraged him to leave me. They'd pushed him, manipulated him, tried to destroy our marriage. And when he'd chosen to stay, they'd turned on him. And then, after his death, they'd tried to steal his inheritance, to rewrite history, to erase me from his life. I realized then why they'd backed down from their claim. Olivia must have sent them the video. She must have threatened to expose them. I contacted Ms. Chen and told her about the video. She was speechless. She said that this was the final piece of the puzzle. This was the proof we needed to definitively prove their guilt, their malice. She said that we could reopen the case, pursue further legal action, even press additional criminal charges. But I decided not to. I'd had enough. I was tired of fighting. I was tired of the anger, the bitterness, the pain. I wanted to move on. I wanted to heal. I wanted to focus on the future. I contacted Olivia and thanked her. She said she was just glad she could help, that she wanted to do the right thing. We talked for a long time. We shared our grief, our regrets, our hopes for the future. We're not friends, not yet, but we're connected. We're two women who were both hurt by the same man in different ways. And we're both trying to find our way forward. As for David's family, I've cut them off completely. I've blocked their numbers, their emails, their social media account. I've instructed my lawyer to have no further contact with them. They're out of my life, forever. I'm focusing on my children, on my career, on my relationship with Ethan. I'm learning to forgive, not David's family, not yet, but myself. I'm learning to let go of the guilt, the regret, the what-ifs. I'm learning to live in the present, to appreciate the good things in my life, to embrace the future. It's been a long, difficult journey, but I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm finally starting to heal, and that's all that matters. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.